Nightingale was in my class. He got lost on the mission. And Peoples was following me in my class. There's some really good pictures. Roger Romaine, I knew. That Singh was a football hero. John Squires, I knew. Steiger was in my class. Westmoreland, I knew. Jimmy Wheeler, I knew. Willard, I knew. I was young, he was in my class.
Well, so, Dr. Brown, is this the first time that you've seen some of those pictures?
Yes, definitely the first time I've seen some. Some of them I didn't really know, and I didn't even know the circumstances in which they were lost or that they were lost. For example, I see Silat Singh, the famous All-American football and basketball players on it. He didn't go overseas.
Right.
So apparently this list must include people in the total Tuskegee experience who were killed. Silat Singh had engine trouble over Lake Roscoe, and he tried to bail out and he got caught in the shooting. He died. But so that means the list includes people who I may never have known because they were killed in training
Stateside, yeah.
or they were killed in combat before I got to combat.
Your memories of combat and some of those people that you now know were listed as missing and killed. What are your thoughts?
Well, one of the things about being 21, you think you're going to live forever, and you think everybody around you is going to live forever. Also, you feel that your skill will enable you to survive, and they won't. And then, of course, the element of chance. You know, if an engine cuts out on takeoff, there's not a hell of a lot you can do about it. So that when I think about that, I think that I was very damn fortunate to survive. I think I was very damn skilled to survive. But I also think that some of them may not have had the skill. Some of them fell into bad luck, and some of them were doing courageous things, attacking the enemy, making a target, flying a mission, and things just got in the way. It might have been engine trouble, it might have been anti-aircraft fire, it might have been a bad takeoff. So it's very touching to see this, but it's also very impressive that these were such young men, and I like to say handsome young men, because the Tuskegee Airmen were some of the most, including your dad, some of the most handsome people you've ever met. And you could see that. That was the cream of the black race at that time. And the young people who are in the service now, if you put their pictures on and uniform, like they look the same way. So it really lets you know that, in a sense, as a combat pilot, you're lucky to survive, but you also feel badly about those people who you lost, and as about 5 or 6 of them were in my class, so I know them very well, knew them very well.
That were in your class that you were the squadron commander of?
No, the squadron commander was when I was a combat pilot in 100th Fighter Squadron. My class was a class where I graduated.
Got it.
Span's class was 43D,
42E.
42E, my class was 44C. They were alphabetical. A was January, B was February, C was March. So mine was March of 44. And about 4 or 5 of those were in 44C. We were replacement pilots. The band and the 99th went over first to North Africa, and we lost a couple people over there. Then the 99th moved to Italy, and then the 332nd, the 100th, 301, 302 came over in January of 44, and then the 99th joined them in June of 44 and became the 4th Squadron, 332nd, better known as Red Tails. So that some of those men in the 66 actually were killed in training, some were killed in North Africa, in Italy, but most of them were killed on missions with the 332nd, where they either got lost in the weather or had an accident taken off or got shot down or any aircraft.
Who were the 4 members of your class that were fallen? Do you remember those?
Fred Brewer, Elton Nightingale, Roosevelt Steiger, Al Young, and I think there was one other.
Mm-hmm. Any precious memories of those?
Well, I have great memories of all of them because one of the things about the training, it's a bonding event. You come together when you first enlist, you get your pre-flight training, and it's a competitive thing. I think we graduated 23, 24, but we started with about 40. Mm-hmm. So it's a competitive, not so much survival of the fittest, but that too, because you had to be fit to survive the racism, but also your skill. Some people just didn't have the skill to fly, and sometimes because it's a quota system, if you had the skill and the check ride came up, you'd be washed out even though you were a good pilot. So that you develop a lot of bonding. Nightingale was from New York. He was a funny guy. Fred Brewer was from North Carolina. He was a very serious guy. He was the president or the captain of our class. Roosevelt Steiger was from, I think, Gary, Indiana. He was pretty rough and tough. Al Young, I think, was from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm not sure about those locations, but we were all really together. And then when we went overseas, we were in different squadrons, like Andy Marshall, who's on that list, was in my squadron, and he got shot down once, and he came back from Greece, and he flew again and got shot down again. Fred Brewer got lost on a mission while we were flying through weather. He disappeared and spun in, we think. A couple others got shot up on Jimmy Calhoun, that's right. He's about 6 of them in my class. Jimmy Calhoun, we didn't do too well. If we had a class of 24, we lost 6. He got lost on a ground support mission where I was flying, and I saw him actually going to the ground and blew up. He got shot down on he crashed on his 5th mission. Really one of the older guys, very smart guy from Connecticut, Bridgeport, Connecticut. So, as a family, you live with each other for a year. From the time you go into pre-flight training till you graduate, March of 43 to March of 44, and then you do your combat training at Walter Vera. That's another 3 months. Mm-hmm. And then when you go overseas, some of our pilots went to the 301, like Charlie White. Some went to 302, like Bill Wheeler. And many of us got in the hundreds. And it was sort of a random thing. And then as you live in a tent, you live with some of the same guys, and you go to a briefing with some of them, you go to the officers club and hang out and play poker with some of them. So you really get to know them like a family.
Were you a good poker player?
Pardon me?
Hold on 1 second, please.
Did what?
I started to ask you, were you a good poker player?
I was a damn good poker player.
Okay, we're holding for just a moment. Now, your father
Yeah.
is not one of the fallen 66.
No, he made it back.
Okay, good.
All right.
And I saw quite a few of his friends in there.
We're about to talk about that as soon as he gives us the okay. This is going wonderfully. But what it does do is open up, for us, work that we see we need to do. There are more stories here that you have. You understand that?
Yeah, I understand. One of the things about a history and recreating history is a combination of your memories, some of which change and fade as time goes by, some of which gets embellished, some of which comes back to you as you begin to reflect, as I'm doing now. And then, of course, there's the historical documents, some of which are accurate and some of which are not. For example, if they say you did something at a certain time, the person who recorded it may have recorded the time wrong, as they did in recording my mission to Berlin. They recorded the time I left the target rather than the time I got the target. So that when people of another generation begin to look at history, you have to realize that it's his story as modified by circumstance
Right.
and evidence and so on. So you try to get the best general picture, and the reaction, the general picture is one of intensity, one of empathy, one of fear, one of pride, and one of friendship. And all of those things factor into looking at these 66 Tuskegee Airmen who were lost.
What do you remember about his dad?
Span was a tough guy. Span was one of the most confident people you would ever meet
I'm sorry.
anywhere.
Just say that again.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. It was never in the shadow.
Oh, it wasn't, okay.
Hold on, let me just sit this down a bit. Now it would be in the shadow. Okay, all right, action, please.
Dr. Brown, is that my phone?
How
How embarrassing. How
That's lesson
embarrassing.
number one. Turn off your cell phone.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, even Dr. Brown knows that.
Not even, especially Dr. Brown.
Especially Dr. Brown.
Knows that part.
Thank you, thank you.
Forgive me for.
That's right. I've been in the media too long to know that.
Oh, my goodness.
I've been doing television so long that I did shows live.
Got you. Okay, Mr. Gann.
And your father's full name?
Span Watson.
Span Watson.
Right.
Let me just cheat a little bit. Oops, no, I can't go there. You know what? Yeah, okay, we're good. Action.
Dr. Brown, what do you remember about his dad, Span Watson?
Well, Span was one of the most determined, confident person that you'd ever knew, and confrontational. Span would confront you on something about baseball or something about politics. And he was extremely confident. He really walked with confidence, and when you were around Span, he thought he was in charge of everybody, including Wayman. And Span and I were really, we tensed back and forth sometimes. But we got to be good friends because I'm not exactly like Span, but I have a lot of confidence. And he wasn't going to push me, and I wasn't going to push him. And we really enjoyed each other. And sometimes I say, Span, everything you say is what you believe, but much of it is wrong. And then he'd come back at me. He's a great guy.
So what memories, you watched these pictures, these photographs.
Yes.
What did you come away from that experience with?
Something Roscoe mentioned was I guess the quality of the pictures, or, I've seen most of those pictures before, but maybe they were little headshots here and there, or in a newspaper, or an old book or something. But to see him that close and actually have a few seconds to kind of absorb them, kind of gets you, because obviously I didn't know any of those gentlemen personally, but the folks that were in the squadron with my father that got killed, he spent a lot of time talking about that, because he was always he was glad that he made it back, but he always felt so bad for the people that didn't. And so every one of those guys, Paul Mitchell, Sidney Brooks, James McCullen, Sherman White, he would talk about their last days or the circumstances of their death very extensively. So to see them all together in a kind of a larger picture, takes me right back to those conversations.
Heavy moment?
Yeah, yeah. And I become friends with James McCullen's nephew, who has been vainly but faithfully searching for his uncle's crash site in Sicily for about the last 10 years. And he's a young man, he's an Army officer, major in the Army station at West Point, and he's taken it upon himself to do all the research that he can, because the guy that was flying with him when he died also didn't come back for that mission. So the exact circumstances of their ending are unknown. So that kind of got to me. But he's actually gone over to Sicily and looked at several possible crash sites, only to find out that those weren't the crash site of his uncle's. But so all those pictures, brought that back to me.
Now, did you know either of those two?
No, I didn't. I didn't know many of the 99th pilots. I only met Spann after we came back from overseas, because the classes were staggered month by month by month, and the 99th people, because they had small classes, they didn't have a full squadron until about a year later. And so I didn't know many of them. I knew them by reputation, and I admired them, because Spann was one of the people I knew by reputation. I admired them, but I did not know them.
Have you been in contact with any of those other family members that you mentioned? Have they been in contact with you at all?
No, because typically what happened was when those gentlemen got killed, as Roscoe said, they were all very young. And so the war went on, people lost contact with their families. Some of them were probably single, not married. And, their squadron mates didn't know their families. So it was a question of somebody, I think, I'm speculating here, but it's a question of, somebody dying, and you got to move on with the war in your life, and you never really get back around to staying in touch with those folks. So I have not communicated with any of them.
Did any picture bring up any memory that your father might have shared? Any single thing, color of hair, way they walked? Anything about the death?
I think the picture of Sidney Brooks, he died in a kind of a weird accident, as it was described to me. He bellied in, and basically his plane caught on fire because he had a drop tank underneath the plane that he wasn't able to get rid of. Eventually caught on fire, consumed the airplane in a ball of flame, but he was able to jump out and run away, and appeared to be relatively unscathed, but they discovered that after he died the next day, surprisingly, that he had breathed in too many of the toxic fumes from the fire, and that eventually shut down his respiratory system. And I thought that was such a weird and cruel thing. I always think about that when I see his name, that he would survive the crash, walk away, and everybody thought he was fine. And then the next day, they came back from a mission and went to see him in the hospital, and upon arriving, found out that he was dead.
Closure for...
Well, let me point out, I did keep in touch with one of the men in my class, family. Jimmy Calhoun's family. I went to meet his wife and his children. I brought his children down to my house and interacted with my kids really right after I came back from overseas in 1946. And I have heard from them over time. And I've heard from his daughter over time. And as a matter of fact, I think she even came to one of the Tuskegee Gammon conventions. So that's the closest I've been to anybody who actually was lost, although I did communicate with some of the widows who wanted to know the circumstances, because I was on some of the missions where some of the people were killed. They wanted to know the circumstances, and I told them what I knew. I saw the plane go down, saw it crash, but I didn't know exactly where, because they were trying to locate the remains and where they might have been buried.
What else can we do for these fallen airmen? how best can their names be resurrected? I don't know if their feats are as necessary, the things that they did, but the spirit of them. It's one thing for the families, no two ways about that. But I think that we're all enriched when we understand a little bit more about these people's lives or what they went through, or just their names and a memory.
I think that this tells you that there's a price for glory, that all of the success of the Tuskegee Airmen, which is now being publicized, came at a great sacrifice. Just a personal sacrifice of racism that all of us did, but the ultimate sacrifice where these people in a segregated military trying something that had never been done before passed away in accidents and combat and circumstances, and that they were people. One of the things that occurs when you look at lists, you just see lists, but behind these pictures of people, as I said, when you look at them, you see just how vibrant and young and courageous they were. And so just by bringing that out, it helps you to realize that the cost of war is some human suffering, both for those who remain, but mainly for those and their families who were lost.
Any ideas about that?
Yeah, I think Roscoe kind of hit on it. The thing that always gets me, and I would like people to appreciate, and I was lucky because my father came back, but for those that didn't, you have to remember these guys were 20, 21, 22 years old in the prime of their life, and all they ever had or were gonna have were taken away or sacrificed, you know, and so it's important not to let them just fade away. And that's kind of when I see some of these young military officers running around, pilots and stuff downstairs, and we get to talking. If we get to this point, you know, one of the things I'll mention to being ex-military myself is, you know, you have to remember those guys were basically you, you know, and imagine if it was you that went out there and lost everything you had, and your family lost you.
Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for doing this great project. You know, it brings
you.
back a lot of
You-
memories and a lot of support.
Well, you may come to rue the moment that you said thanks, because we will be back in contact.
I know you will. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. Okay, good.
Thank
As
you.
well.
Everybody
Yeah.
just stay right there for a moment.
Did good.
So he gets us still.